All right, I think we're live. Cool. So, hey everyone, thanks for joining tonight. Apologies for just how hollow, like the audio sounds on this side. It's, as you can see, I'm in a very cramped little small room over here. We recently moved houses, so it's yeah, but I think saying this, I think it's been a couple of meetups now where I've been just telling you guys about how we've been moving houses and whatever. You might also just hear my daughter in the background. Yeah, this time, this is literally the worst time on my side to actually be doing meetups, but in terms of just the activity that goes on this side. Cool. But so without further ado, let's dive into it. So first and foremost, thanks everyone for joining. We have a couple of events happening this month. So I think next week we have a React specific one. And then end of the month, we kind of have actual kind of a hackathon event again. So which is also why I'm doing this one solo tonight, because there's so much happening that we need to actually partition the work between us. But yeah, so thanks everyone for joining. Then let's get into it. So effectively, as always, I just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors, NML, who Justin works for. They have kind of been helping out with the stuff we've been doing way back when we were still Cape Town front-end developers. And they're still kind of helping out a ton in terms of just keeping the lights on, paying for things like StreamYard and so forth. Also IO, which a lot of you might know Liesel or have encountered Liesel as well. She very graciously helps out with a lot of stuff, sponsors a lot of stuff on behalf of IO. They also run Zap, which is the South African product design community, which we also collaborate with quite a bit. So definitely check them out as well. Yeah, so first and foremost, just thanks to them. We wouldn't be able to do these type of things without them. So then secondly, first and foremost, thanks to Chris for joining us tonight. So I actually met Chris. So there was an event maybe a month, 2 months ago, where Thor from the Superbase team actually came down in Cape Town, and we had a bit of a meetup in terms of just general open source and so forth. And Chris also did a presentation there. And it was a really phenomenal presentation. And I actually asked him, can you actually do one as well online? Just so we also just have it available for people who couldn't make that event. And probably very thematically applicable now in Hacktober. Yeah, if you ever want a time to actually start getting involved with open source and so forth, this is the time. You can score some swag and so forth. And we can maybe chat about that at the end as well, beyond the actual talk, in terms of, cool, what is Hacktoberfest, and how can you actually get involved and so forth. And yeah. But so with that, that's maybe a nice segue into, as always, all questions in the text chat, please. We can, if there's enough questions, I might stop Chris and then we can address some of them. Otherwise, we can just do questions at the end and take it from there. Yeah, so just in short, I'll let Chris do an actual proper introduction of himself. But in short, so he, in his personal capacity, runs a daily.dev tips. And you'll actually see, I think it's your Twitter handle there, at daily.dev-tips1. I guess daily.dev tips was already taken. And then he also, not to be confused with daily.dev tips, he works for DevTips, dev.tips. So that's also what he does as a job. And this is mostly kind of both of these endeavors are in the world of kind of just sharing developer resources and so forth, and aggregating information and so forth. But yeah, first, yeah, thanks so much, Chris. I'm happy to hand over to you and let you actually introduce yourself properly. All right.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me again. It's been amazing doing this talk. Like Schalk said, I did this talk in Cape Town a couple weeks back, and got super great responses to this. It's also an article I revamp every year, and every time around this time, because Hacktoberfest starts and people start to get motivated again to contribute to open source. And a lot of times people feel I don't know, feel a bit like where to start. I'm not that technical, or even if you are, like I'm like quite technical, but still, it's like very like, okay, what do I do? Like I can't just go ravaging around in someone else's code base. Like it feels scary. So there are different ways to get started in open source, and I presented a little slide. Also has a little bit more information about myself, so I'll start presenting that. So the talk of today is different ways of contributing to open source, and we'll get into that. But first, let me introduce myself. So I'm Chris, and that is indeed my Twitter handle at daily.dev1, because the one without the one is already taken, unfortunately. I am married, and I am also a proud dog owner. You can see my dog there and my wife. Um, in my day job, I work at daily.dev, which is a fantastic tool for any developer, really. It's a news aggregator where we bring you the latest news directly in your new tab experience, which is pretty cool. I get to see a lot of news. My job really revolves around being the team lead there for the web team. But that still means I am pretty much a hands-on engineer as well. In the general life, I'm pretty much what you would call a digital nomad. I don't like to use the term, but I'm pretty sure I fall under this, because I'm technically from the Netherlands, but my wife is from South Africa, so we spend a lot of time in between and in different places and just enjoying different countries as well. It's one of the perks of remote work. Yeah, besides my day job, I have another day job, you can basically say, which is my blog, daily.dev.com. It started in lockdown as kind of a fun project, and it has been almost 950 days now that I've written an article every single day. It's all around web development. So yeah, if you're into that stuff, be sure to check it out. Some cool articles. Currently working on a whole portfolio series. So if you are planning to build a portfolio, follow along. And when we're not talking tech, I do enjoy hikes, hence Cape Town. And I also enjoy good food, mainly pizza though. All right, so let's get started with this talk. So contributing to open source is obviously very, it's a very thing you see a lot, like especially on Twitter, but as well in other communities, everyone talks about it. Like a lot of projects are open source these days. And a lot of projects are looking for people to help them. I think the main thing that people tend to forget is that open source doesn't particularly mean that it's free, or that it's not a company. So for instance, take daily.dev, which is also open source, but it's a company. They pay their employees, and they sometimes pay contributors, or they give swag or whatever it may be. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's free. I think that's always a good point to take along. But when it comes to contributing, there are many ways, and I think often as developers we tend to believe like, okay, it has to be like technical, right? I have to write some code or fix some test cases for these people or whatever, introduce a new feature, and it's very actually unlikely that you'll be contributing that deep, because often these people have like a core team that actually works on these like high level features, right, to introduce in this project. But there are really a lot of ways, and you'll see a couple now highlighted. Some might surprise you, some might be like, okay, that's very obvious. But let's see. So the first one is actually to maintain GitHub issues, which I use Astro in a lot of my examples. Astro is also an open source project, pretty cool. For those who don't know it, it's like a static website builder built for speed. So I'm a big fan of bringing the lean web back, sorry. And Astro is really doing a great job there. They're getting a lot of traction these days. They are a super cool community. So if you don't have any idea of where to contribute to, like, check out Astro. Like, all these topics really come down to Astro as an example. But obviously, if you have other projects you love, like, definitely go for those. But to get back to the point, maintaining GitHub issues is a really good point because, first of all, as core members of a team, it's very hard to keep track of it. You can see it here. Like, this is in the early days of Astro when I took the screenshot, and you can already see they had like 188 open issues, and it's a pain for core maintainers to go through these. So it really helps if someone else can go take some time to go through them. Like, okay, is everything complete? Maybe you can even help them, point them to the right direction. Maybe it's someone just needing an answer on a question that because you use the product. But in some cases, also just about asking them for more details so that the core maintainers don't have to do that. So I think there's a lot of help you can provide there. Also, labeling issues is definitely something that comes to mind. And yeah, I can tell you this really helps projects to keep that all streamlined. The second one is to get involved on Discord. I'm calling it Discord here just because I have the example of Astro. In certain cases, it will be Slack. In certain cases, it will be a dedicated forum or a Twitter community, whatever they use. But a community, get involved in the community. What I mean by that is, in this example, Astro does some events. They do weekly RFC calls and show of Fridays, where people can just either show their stuff or raise issues that they had, discuss them, give your opinion on it. So it's a really good way to voice your experience or your ideas, right? So it doesn't mean you have to know the answer, but you can voice how you see it and really help them understand what might be the issue, right? So sometimes it's something is unclear in the documentation, but because you explain it in a certain way during these events, it can really help. Also, just like helping other people, giving advice, linking them up with the right people. Like, this guy also had the same issue. This person had this issue. Maybe chat to them. It really helps, and I use it all the time. I'm currently working on some webshop project, and I joined their Slack channel. I'm searching in there, asking questions, and other people, no core maintainers, they point me to the right people. Like, I noticed this person had the exact same issue. Maybe go talk to them, and it helped me solve my problem. So it's really valuable. The next one is to actually follow the docs, which this is one of these that sounds super obvious, but often is like forgotten, right? So what I did in the beginning when I started working with Astro, I was just following the docs. Like, okay, does this make sense? Following the installation guide, and sometimes I would hit a wall. Like, I wouldn't know what to do, and I would just go back to the Discord and say, like, okay, guys, I'm following this documentation on this page, and this step is unclear. Like, I've done it, but either it's giving me an error or it's not doing what I think it should do. And that really helps them in return to say, oh, wait, okay, yeah, we forgot to mention you actually have to do this step first. So it's a very strong argument to help them improve the docs for people that will come after you, because you might solve this issue, right? You might go past it, but the next person will come, they don't know what to do. They don't know that you already solved it. So it can be really valuable to give feedback on the docs. And in some cases, including Astro, you can even contribute directly to the docs, right? So at the bottom of each page, they have like a little edit on GitHub thing where you can click and just type whatever it's needed to be typed there, and that takes away from the core team to have to do it. So that can be really beneficial. All right, so this one is obviously you can translate documents, right? So it doesn't have to be docs. It can also be a product itself, right? It can be multilingual. And you might have some expertise in a certain language, right? So that's a really helpful thing sometimes. I see a lot of projects actually asking for like Asian translations, because there's often a gap where English may not be the main language, but the docs are often in English. So I see a lot of requests for either Asian or Russian kind of translations. But any translation really does. Like it really helps so people understand things in their own language. So it's definitely a good thing to do. I've translated many docs for Astro into the Dutch translations, which is also cool. You get to learn a lot about the project that way, because you're going through all the docs. You have to really read what they're trying to explain, so it helps you understand the product really well. So if it's something you're passionate about, I would really suggest translating for them. Then we get to answer questions. And in the example, I'm using Discord again, just because it's something that I had a good example of. It was some error I got, and Matthew is a really cool guy. He helped me out to solve this issue. But it can be anywhere, right? Often you'll see maybe even colleagues, they might ask you like, "Oh, I'm stuck with this. Can you help me?" And that already helps a project. What I often would suggest is to make it public available. So like maybe tweet about it, put it in the Discord, but other people will find this useful. So I think that's always very good to do. And this one I find people always laugh about this one, but I think it's very underrated, is to spread the word about certain open source projects. It's something you see more people do these days. But if you really like a project, like if you think about it, like how you're using this project, maybe for free, right? Like I'm using Astro. I don't really pay for it, but I benefit from it by using it. And a lot of people could benefit from it as well, right? So I made my whole website with Astro. So I write about it a lot, like how I use it, why I use it, that I think it's cool. And I think it's a great way to give back to them. Like they provided you this tool for free in this case. And, to talk about it or spread the word can really help them, become known. So you guys might know Fireship YouTube channel. He does a lot of these like cool projects that he highlights, and it gives a lot of view to them. So I think it's a great way to contribute to open source without like knowing that you're actually contributing, but you're helping them a lot by spreading the word about this project. Another one that I want to highlight is, even though we're developers, often we can also help with designs and maybe even UX, right? Like in this case, Astro was very public about this. They had like in the beginning, they didn't have a brand designer, and their logo looked way different than it does now. So they just asked people like, "Oh, well, if you could design the Astro logo, what would you come up with?" And I think the one they're using now, with the fire coming out of the rocket, is actually by a community member. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that you can contribute in this kind of way, doing designs or helping them with like designing maybe some landing pages or making the docs look better, that kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be like technical. It can be really front end related, like you're helping them improve the website, improve the mobile view, even like stuff like that. It goes a long way. And then we come to the examples, right? So in the case of Astro, it's obviously a project that really lends itself well to examples, where people have created some examples with different frameworks, with different scenarios that you would want to use Astro in. And by improving these examples, there are a couple things we can do, right? So it's either to add new examples. So I don't know, let's say they don't have a framework for Angular by the looks of it. So I could then go in and say like, oh wait, I can like create a sample with using Angular, for instance, which someone will be looking for, because someone is already invested in Angular and they want to see how it works. So that's one way. Another one is to just go test them out, right? To see how they work. Like maybe you can improve them. Like, oh, I'm going to add something, or, I had this issue with this specific framework, and I'm gonna improve this sample by adding certain things. And I think the third way is to update them, right? So in the case of Astro, at one stage they went with Astro 1.0, which was quite a big change, and a lot of things changed. And you can see they have a lot of examples. They have way more now. And they all needed updating, updating to the latest dependencies, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of automation going on there, but still this required a lot of manual testing and checking that it would work. So I think it's a very underrated way of helping with improving the examples. And then my absolutely favorite one that people really never think about is the fact that you can do company contributions, right? So we are very fortunate at daily.dev. We get a budget. So each employee gets a certain budget per month to spend on open source projects. So it goes two ways. There's a monetary value. So the company says, okay, you get X amount of money per month and spend it on whichever open source project that you think is valuable, right? So it can be something generic. Like you can see we sponsor Free Code Camp because someone thought it was very valuable, which it is. It's amazing. But it's not particularly related to our business, if that makes sense. So it's just something that helped them, and they were really wanting to contribute to them. On the other case, it can be projects we use. So you can see there we sponsor Dominic, who is a big maintainer of React Query, for those who know. And it's something we use heavily under the hood. So, we really want to sponsor him in terms of like, he gave us something that we use a lot, and we want him to be able to support this lifestyle of maintaining it so we can keep using it. So I think the monetary value is really great, but sometimes it's impossible, right? So I would really want to ask you guys to have a chat with like either your manager or your boss, like if it's an option, because you have to see it like this. Like there are things that your company will pay for, right? Like an office, like I don't know, WebStorm if you use it, whatever project it may be, cloud hosting. But there are a lot of projects under the hood that you use that are open source. So maybe they can find some budget yearly to contribute to these projects, so they can be sustainable. So I would really argue that that's a really good thing that companies can contribute to. The secondary thing with company contributions is that we get set hours per month to actually contribute to these projects, right? So obviously, being a developer, it's a lot of work. You're always doing something. You don't have spare time really. So when do I really go and contribute? So we get like set hours a month to go in these code bases and help them with certain things. And again, this could be any of these like things I presented today. Doesn't have to be writing code for them. So I think that's a really great way of helping these projects know they're valued and keeping them alive, because that's very important. Like a lot of these people do this stuff for free because they love open source and because they believe in the project. A lot of them also get big sponsorships from big companies, which is absolutely great. But it doesn't mean we can't contribute to it as well, because we are all benefiting from these open source projects. And yeah, that's kind of my wrap up. There are a lot more things you can do to contribute. I'll leave that to your own imagination. But I hope I gave you some examples of how you can start. And this is obviously your sign to start contributing to open source. I will open up to any questions that you may have.
Cool. Sorry, I was just trying to find the button to add myself to the stream. Justin usually runs these, so I'm pretty much kind of like trying to kind of stumble through StreamYard. Yeah, that was great. Thanks so much, Chris. as always, I want to kind of open the floor for any general questions. You can ask them in text chat. As always, I just have a ton of questions, so I'm obviously more than happy to just get started until like anyone else asks any questions. And yeah, let me just start with. I actually don't know what the setup is this year with Hacktoberfest. Just because I have so much going on in my life, I don't think I would be able to contribute this year. I don't know if you actually know, because I know that for a very long time there was a specific T-shirt that you could get if you contributed beyond a certain amount. But I think this year they kind of changed it a bit, where if you contribute to specific projects, those projects have actually said they will give you swag or something. I don't know if you actually know much about how Hacktoberfest is happening this year.
Yeah, they do. I had to look it up as well because although
I'm looking at it right now as well.
I am contributing to open source, but not. I'm actually not participating in Hacktoberfest as like the branded thing, just because I couldn't commit to that time. But it seems that they do have some reward kit, but I think it might just be the badge on Github that you get, and I think indeed they changed it to be around open source projects could decide whether they want to give swag out to people. From what I've heard. Or someone says here that it's the first 40K people that make.
Okay, cool. Because I do remember there was a problem a couple of years ago. It might have been a year or 2 years ago, where you actually had a ton of like low level like PRs. It just I remember I was very actively involved with the Netlify CMS team. Then I was also kind of like very actively contributing, and like also joined like a lot of the internal like team meetings and stuff before I had a daughter. And I do remember there was a very specific issue that we had where people like there was I think there was a specific video on YouTube or something. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. That's like said like one easy trick to do, and like it was something like changing the project, like the description to like awesome Netlify or something like that. I can't remember. I'll maybe share a link if I find it. And a lot of open source projects just got spammed with people doing like just like really ridiculous, like mundane changes to the text documents. Like just changing words to synonyms or whatever. And I do remember like even then like the Netlify team was kind of very inundated by like those type of PRs. And I think after that, GitHub actually said you need to say that you actually like you are an actual like you actually allow Hacktoberfest contributions.
Yeah, they did that, and they also mark it. You can now mark it as spam if you're the maintainer. Like if people just do like change a comma somewhere, you can just mark it as unalleged. And if they do that too often, they'll actually get banned from contributing to.
Is it?
Yeah, to the Hacktoberfest labels.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they did ramp it up this year.
Yeah, and it's just the issue of scale. I mean, like it's gonna happen. Like if you sorry, let me just switch on my light. Like it's eventually, if you reach enough. I remember in the very early days when they didn't even have a cap, where it's like wasn't even the first X amount of people. It was just like anyone who contributed, just because like it wasn't that big of a thing yet. But obviously now it's pretty big. So I see there's a specific question from Kali. And I don't necessarily know whether I can speak to this because I'm not in the world of Java. I don't know if you have any experience in Java. So he says he's currently working on a Udemy course in Java, planning on contributing to open source in order to gain some experience. Are there any cool projects you can recommend for me? I don't know if you maybe can think of anything.
Yeah, I don't know any projects, but I do want to give you some advice. If you go to hacktoberfest.com, they have a section in participation where it says resources for beginners. And there's a lot of websites that actually will link to certain projects that are looking, and you can filter them often on tags. So you can say, I want like Java specific projects, and they will list you all the issues that you can help contribute, or find projects that you actually enjoy. So I would say that's a good thing to start with.
Yeah, definitely. And I also see, I'm looking at the Hacktoberfest site now, and they actually have um, a specific section for non-code contributions. So they actually specifically say, anyone who writes, designs, tests, mentors. Honestly, like I don't know if you have ever seen that there's a specific article that kind of unpacks the process of where WebAssembly kind of opened up like submissions for a logo, and like just some of the submissions that was received. It's amazing. I love it so much. I'll also share a link to that maybe in a second. But I think you can just Google like WebAssembly logos. I think the article is titled "This is what happens when developers do design" or something like that. As it like, I can tell anyone here who's maybe like more of a designer than a developer, sure, like almost all open source projects, if they don't necessarily have like solid design yet, like it is like there's so many low hanging fruit. Even if you're like kind of in the world of HTML and CSS primarily, a lot of documentation is like not even responsive. And I think for myself, like given that I have very limited time, sometimes I read documentation on my phone. And I've actually decided to use specific tools above others just because like I can actually read the documentation on my phone, whereas the other one just explodes if I try and view it on my phone. Yeah. But yeah, like there's also I also see on the Hacktoberfest website there is a link to the Discord as well. So I'm pretty sure if you ask around there, you'll also get a ton of great responses. Yeah. So then there's another question around, is there a resource that you know of that features new and upcoming open source projects that are actively looking for contributors? I think there was something at some point.
Yeah, you still have it. They're also linked on the Hacktoberfest website again. It's I know you have goodfirstissue.dev, first contributions, awesome for beginners. Like there's a lot of websites that kind of explore around this whole topic. So I think there's you'll find a lot of resources there.
Yeah, so for those of you that are on ZA Tech, I'll also just quickly share the link to that as well. I know there's a ton of people on ZA Tech that actually like maintain like open source projects. And I know like I've helped on some of them, but like I can promise you, if you just ask on ZA Tech, like, is there anyone who needs help on like some type of open source project? I'm actually, so for those of you, like, I'm actually in. So, this is also maybe another good one. Maybe plugging this a bit, but I don't feel I'm not that involved in it anymore, so I can maybe speak about it. So CodeBridge as well. So CodeBridge, they are actually based. So I used to run it back in the day, but nowadays I'm not that involved in it anymore. But they are based in the southern suburbs in Cape Town. In Clermontish area, and they have like in-person meetups every Thursday, but there's also like a lot of like online activity around these in terms of like contributing to projects. And so it's effectively a space where people come and they kind of come and work on their projects, they find contributors and so forth. So that's also really great. I think like as a start, it's maybe good to start, like my advice would be to start looking in your immediate area, maybe people you know that are other developers, or maybe like a very specific like South African community or something, because I think their people are very much willing to kind of onboard you. Whereas if you send a random message to the React team and you're like, hey, sup guys, what can I do? It's going to be a bit different because they already have so much they need to deal with. And I think if it's someone's personal project or whatever, like as an example that I can think of now. So those of you that know about the Eskimse Push app, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on the stream, but so they are actually looking at the moment of having people help like maintain an open API that's just like a API that is effectively a companion API to the app that you can kind of like hit as an endpoint to get like load shedding information and so forth. Yeah, but like it's just like, once again, they are so I shouldn't say anything bad. Yeah. All I'm saying is we have like one of our videos has gotten removed before. And it's gotten removed. It was actually the video like with Brett, like who's the actual blind developer. And he was talking about like accessibility and whatever. It's actually for Global Accessibility Day, and like there's no drama. It's like literally just we got an email the next day from YouTube saying the video is removed because it appears like it's a scam. We were like, what? Yeah, YouTube is gonna YouTube. Okay, so like I rather err on the side of being safe. Yeah, so they are actually looking for kind of people to help out with the public API and so forth. So honestly, if you just like ask around a bit, you'd be surprised like how many people are even just in their personal capacity maintaining some type of like personal thing. Even with the FEDSA stuff, like our website. So we're having a hackathon at the end of the month. In like if you're in the Cape Town area in the waterfront, that is a whole day event where we're actually working on the actual FEDSA website. And like kind of just with a lot of designers as well, like in terms of just like, because obviously like none of us get time to actually work on it. Yeah. So I think my advice would be start looking in your kind of inner circle first, and people that you can actually form personal relationships with before you kind of go and jump to like, hey, I want to contribute to TypeScript or whatever. Yeah. Cool. So once again, any other questions you guys are welcome to ask. I want to maybe ask, what was the first thing that you contributed to, Chris? Do you know?
Yeah, I think open source, it was actually probably Symfony. So it was quite a big one. So it was like, yep.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
It was just something that we were using, and we had our own wrapping layer on top of this like for a long time already. And yeah, it kind of annoyed me to the part where every time I had to use our own like library, so I just like contributed it to the source. So it was kind of a workaround for a known bug. And yeah, that was my first experience. It was quite rough because it's a big project, so you have a lot of things that you actually have to adhere to, like write tests and things like that that I wasn't used to at the time. So it was quite rough.
Yeah, so mine is actually, for what it's worth, my first PR still hasn't been merged to this day. So very early on in the big way back, I don't know if you can still do it, but back in the day, you know, like if you go on npm, it has those little like quirky names there at the top, and you could do a pull request to actually add more names to that. And I think like so the crux here being that npm doesn't actually stand for anything. So it's like, fake things that npm can stand for. A lot of people say it, I don't know, like, so apparently, like, I assume it stands for Node Package Manager, but the claim is that it doesn't stand for anything. So I think I made a submission for never-ending presidential motorcade, and that to this day still hasn't been merged. Like that PR has gone through like the acquisition by Microsoft and everything, and that PR is still there.
Amazing. They should accept it though, and then you actually contributed to Microsoft.
Yeah, see, I didn't know about that. I've actually contributed to some of the TypeScript documentation as well. I think like I have a very weird hobby that is actually I enjoy reading documentation. I don't know, like I've met a couple of people, but I actually enjoy it. I really enjoy it. And like I enjoy kind of seeing, okay, cool. This is how they've gone about it. This is how they kind of built their API. I enjoy reading documentation. So because of that, like a ton of the stuff is just like documentation, like pull requests, or like if links. More often than not, it's links that are broken in documentation. Yeah. Cool. So there's another question around, as a beginner, I'm juggling between finding projects that I contribute on, help with, and also trying to find projects that aren't low quality, there for the sake of being open source. Yeah. Yeah, like that is a tough one. Chris, I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, I must agree. It is a tough one because you will find projects that are just there for the sake of being there, and they might be looking for stuff, but they are sometimes low quality. I think it also comes down to I tend to pick projects that I either believe in or personally use. So this comes down to what Schalk said about like maybe like in your close group of friends, there may be people who have an open source project that need help. I think that definitely helps. I find myself always contributing to projects that I actively use or investigating to use. So and these are often also like the smaller ones that just need some little help, or like people trying out and break things.
Yeah, like, definitely. And I think also like one that's, unless you're specifically looking for code to actually contribute code, but one that I often kind of do is specifically when I'm doing research or whatever. So I've actually done a ton of contributions to styleguides.io. Just because like sometimes I do research on something, or I look like, oh cool, like, and I use, for example, something like styleguides.io, and then in my own research I also find other things as well on top of what they provide, and I just do a PR to add that as well. So I think like a great one is Awesome Lists. So I don't know if you, let me actually just share a link quickly. So Awesome List is kind of like it's effectively, let's see, I think, is there like a landing page? Okay, I'll also maybe like put a link to that. But effectively, like Awesome Lists are just like, hey, if you're interested in something, it's almost like a GitHub repo that just has a README file that has a ton of really great resources. So, for example, like web components, or even something like HTML, or there's probably like an awesome Astro, or whatever. And oftentimes, like, once again, when I'm learning a new technology, so like I did a very deep dive in web components at one point, and like I obviously worked through like a lot of the stuff on the Awesome List, and then obviously I kind of did a bit more of my own research, and then obviously as I came across like really cool things, I did like a PR, and I'm like, hey, also this is maybe something you want to include, and so forth. I think it's shouldn't be understated like how much open source contributions are not code. And I think specifically in things like Astro and so forth, and for example TypeScript and so forth, you have your core maintainers that like know that code base in and out. And a lot of the activity around it in terms of open source is things like documentation, unit tests, and so forth. And you shouldn't discount that, because by doing those type of things, you're actually freeing up the people that are really great developers from actually being able to focus on the thing itself, and not having to worry about things like translation and so forth. Yeah.
100% agree. Yeah, I think that's and like you said, often like there are a lot of content related things that you can do. There's a lot of these examples where people just aggregate specific content, and you can really help by just adding things that you find helpful.
And I think also another thing is, don't necessarily always think, like, I think it's important to not always just think about open source purely in terms of code or pull requests. I think a lot of things, for example, ZITech, I've been using ZITech for a very long time. I was just a regular user for a very long time. And like, I just started helping out with things. And then eventually, like, Nick just reached out and he was like, "Hey, like, you actually do a ton of stuff. Do you just want to officially do it as an admin?" And I was like, "Cool, all right. Worst mistake of my life." But because now I have to deal with like all the like other things. But yeah, like, I think a lot of it, like, it's just communities and things, like Discord, like, so not necessarily even pull requests. I think you can also contribute by a lot of like the Discord. So for example, I remember also with the Netlify CMS stuff, there was a lot of people that just kind of served as moderators on the Discord. And just help people like answer questions and so forth. So I think it's important to not only just think about pull requests, but like you can also take on like responsibility within communities around specific things.
Yeah, there's a funny thing with Astro, because I obviously decided at one stage to convert my blog to Astro, and they were very much like new, right? So everyone built like their own little demo website with 4 pages, and here I came with 900 blog posts. And I technically just broke their build tool because I couldn't build as many pages. And like they had no idea that would happen because like no one tried it to that extent. So it was really helpful for them that I came and said like, "Oh, here, use my website as a demo." So now they kind of use that as a benchmarking tool for all their revamps on the build.
You are the edge case.
Yeah, I'm kind of the edge case. So it really helps to speak up about these things and not think like, "Oh, the tool doesn't work," because they literally helped me out within half an hour and it was fixed. So
I think that's also like a really great point. Like, if like a lot of times, like those type of things are also really helpful. So how I got involved back in the day with the Netlify CMS team is I was actually working on kind of a non-profit project for, I didn't know if I can actually mention that, but like a non-profit project around kind of like journalism and so forth. And we kind of used a Netlify CMS to kind of create templates for people and so forth. And one of the big issues we were having is that Netlify CMS has very rudimentary like multilingual kind of like it doesn't really have a robust like multilingual support. And obviously, as a South African, like building that thing, we're required to support all 11 official languages. So that's probably an issue they've never had before. Like if you think about like European sites or American sites or whatever, Americans maybe like Spanish, English, maybe something else. Try actually using Netlify CMS and having to have 11 different like locales, or not locales, but like actual versions of the content. It gets a pain. Because I think most people would just create 2 input fields. They'd be like the Spanish title and maybe the English title again. But having 11 versions of each input field is a pain. And I think that's how so once again, I came and I was like, "Hey, listen, like, do you guys know how to solve this problem?" And I think like a lot of it was just actually me chatting to them and telling them like, what is the actual problem that I'm having? And they kind of pointed me in a lot of directions. They're like, cool, maybe have a look at this thing, or like if you look at this file in the actual core internals, like this is where that happens. So you'd be surprised if you come with an issue that like people are willing to actually help you kind of be part of solving that issue, even if it's just like actually keeping you in the conversation to just check, okay, cool, are we sure we understand exactly what the issue is here? That's very invaluable. So it's very much related to your issue as well.
Yeah, and like you said, it's also like sometimes it's product related, right? So at daily.dev, we had quite a few users like reaching out to us, like, "Oh, I would really like to see my reading history because then I can go back to the articles I read before." And it was something we didn't have before. Then we never envisioned it was a need for people, but then people started like asking for it, and because of that we introduced it. So it's like because people speak up, we can actually know like, okay, people are looking for this. So just speaking up about issues is already helping us to improve.
Yeah, so I think on GitHub, even like if you create issues, it actually tracks it as a contribution. So you can also see how many issues you created through, like in the year and so forth. Yeah, like I think it actually indicates that you've contributed to a project if you created an issue for that project. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so I think that is about it. Thanks so much, Chris. This was really great, and maybe as a good segue into kind of open, like ending off open source. Like also another way you can contribute is to do a talk on something that you find really interesting. And likewise, we are also more than happy to help you if you're like, hey, I want to do a talk. I've never done a talk before. I think Justin and I have kind of worked with people quite a ton where we kind of help them to put a talk together and so forth. Yeah, so definitely I'd also encourage everyone, if you have an idea or you want to share something or so forth, definitely reach out to us as well. Chris, where can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, mainly active on Twitter, so you can see the handle in screen at daily.dev1. Or you can find my blog on daily-dev-tips.com. And yeah, there's some more contact information on the website as well. That's another way where you can find me. And I'm also in the ZA Tech channels, so you can also find me there.
Cool, awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone that joined, and we will see you again next week for a talk on React testing. Awesome. Thanks everyone.